Avatar: The Last Airbender is legendary. I am not kidding you. Even after so many years, it's not only remained fresh in the minds of those who watched it 17 years ago, but it's bringing in new viewers through Paramount+. They even have action figures like Uncle Iroh and Prince Zuko, honor not included. It was great enough to spawn an offshoot, which some would say was subpar compared to the greatness of Avatar, but personally I really enjoyed it. After all, it brought us Zaheer, one of the most interesting villains I've ever had the pleasure to see. It also brought us various comics, as well as some novels, including 2 very good ones about Avatar Kyoshi. Man, those books are truly fantastic. Those of us who have been here long enough know that our channel, the Amagi, actually originated as an Avatar-based YouTube channel. Ah, the good old days. We have long since moved on to many other great series, such as Naruto. Sometimes it's nice to get back to the old stomping grounds though, all while staying true to who we have become since then. And as such, I think it would be a cool idea to do another What If. Today's What If will be if Avatar Aang was a Shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. That sounds fun, right? And if y'all like it, maybe I'll follow up on it and even visit Naruto as an airbender or something. Sound good? Let's get into it. But first, welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Before we truly start with our What If, I think it's best to set a few ground rules just to make sure everything flows correctly. The best thing about Naruto and Avatar is that its characters are generally considered to be nothing more than athlete levels of strength. Unless you're Rock Lee, you probably aren't going to be doing too much damage physically. Well, Naruto the last movie did show us Naruto casually tanking a shot that split the moon in half, but at least in the start of both, they seem very human in strength levels, which makes this easier as it equalizes their bases. The problem we'd run into immediately out of the gate is that they both use very different energies to manipulate elements. Naruto uses an energy type merely known as chakra, while Avatar, much like Dragon Ball and so many other series, use chi. However, it's not impossible to link these two, as the basics and usage of both are similar enough that they could mesh if we tried hard enough. Naruto possesses 5 basic chakra natures, with other natures being created by mixing these together, with only yin and yang release being separate from these, being the manifestation of spiritual and physical things. These 5 natures are fire, water, wind, earth, and lightning release. Now, Avatar also possesses chakras. Guru Pathik was the one to explain to Aang about the chakra. There are 7 of them throughout the body, and though somehow Naruto, through the 8 gates technique, includes another, and each one serves as a gate that allows energy to flow. They are, and forgive me if I mispronounce any of these, Muladhara, which is the chakra that represents earth. Then there is Svadhisthana, that represents water. Manipura, which represents fire. Anahata, which represents air. Vishuddha for energy itself. Anja for, I don't remember if Avatar ever explained what this one did. Insight, maybe? Then Sahasrara, which is enlightenment, which was used to explain how Aang enters the Avatar state. Altogether, these elements and their respective chakras, whether it actually be an energy or merely wells of energy, all function similarly. So for the time being, I would like you to suspend your disbelief and just assume that both Avatar and Naruto's techniques and styles are compatible with each other. With all of this out of the way, I think we're set to begin our What If in earnest. Oh wait, one last thing. We are going to take Aang right out of the time where he left the Southern Air Temple and place him in the Naruto world. This means he never iceberged, which also means he has no prior experience with the Avatar state, doesn't know that the airbenders have been destroyed, and won't have his natural lifespan shortened. Well, we say shortened, but in actuality he was 110 years old when the series started, meaning he will easily live into the Boruto era. That is, if he actually survives in this dog-eat-dog world that we call the 5 Great Shinobi Nations. So now, let's get into it. Aang with his flying bison Appa were flying away from the Southern Air Temple and flew straight into a storm. They fall into the ocean and seemingly go under. What happened next, Aang isn't quite sure of. He doesn't know how, but he wakes up being pulled out of a river by a group of men wearing green flak jackets and possessing strange headbands with odd symbols on them. "Where am I?" he asks weakly, having just been revived. "Where's Appa?" The shinobi bring him back to the village where they admit him to a hospital. He's discharged a day later and left in the strange village with the faces of great men carved into the surrounding mountains. "Welcome to Konoha," they bid the boy. They're a friendly village, but they're also very cautious. They've never seen a beast like Appa and assume him to be some new experiment. Even further, the kids ask why a boy like Aang would have a tattoo on his head. Aang tells them he's an air nomad from the Southern Air Temple, and the people begin to believe he might be crazy, as they've never heard of an air nomad from the Air Temple. At one point or another, I would assume that Aang would draw enough attention to bring him into the interrogation unit under Ibiki Marino, who would be trying to piece everything together alongside Aang. Ibiki would ask Aang if his terms, Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom, could be other names for the Land of Fire and the Land of Earth, but Aang seems completely unfamiliar with the map. He claims that the Fire Nation is in the west, with the Earth Kingdom making up most of the continent to the east, with the Water Tribe dividing the northern and southern poles. Yet this map shows that most of these nations are together. Aang mentions the Earth King and the Fire Lord, the Great Walled City of Ba Sing Se, as well as the incredible mail delivery system of Omashu, but Ibiki has no clue of what these things are. Aang is beginning to think he's going crazy and starts to panic a bit. Ibiki begins to worry if he is perhaps certifiable. However, they tell Aang to calm down and just try to adjust. They get him a place to stay for the time being, and Aang just sort of thinks about where he is and what he's going to do next. Last thing he heard, the Fire Nation was at war with the world, and now he was in a world where the last Great War ended. As it stands, he has nowhere to go and no way to get back. But then again, wasn't that his wish? He was the Avatar and bore the weight of the world on his shoulders. Now he's free to be normal. Well, as normal as he desires. He wishes that Gyatso could be there with him. He misses Gyatso and wishes that he at least said goodbye. But with this, Aang decides he would like to try life in this world. A world where nobody knows what an avatar is. He would enroll in the academy to learn what this chakra thing is, and find it a completely different thing than what he's used to, with completely different usage. However, he finds the basic principles to be similar. He's also astounded that everyone in this world has the basic capability to use more than one element. Some of these so-called Jonin have mastered all of the elements. One of these alone could probably fulfill the mandate of the Avatar. Aang isn't as gifted in these jutsu as the others are. When it comes down to the final exam, he isn't able to make a shadow clone. However, he does try to impress the teachers by spinning 2 marbles in his hand with his airbending. When that doesn't work, he displays the air scooter, a technique that he created that earned him the title of Airbending Master. It's how he got his arrow. This is enough to get him on a team, as his strange usage of wind nature could be useful in battle, but even further proves that he has large wells of chakra if he's capable of doing such a feat. They decide to assign him to Team 7 under Kakashi Hatake, and to be the peers of Sasuke and Sakura Haruno. He would meet with Kakashi, and he'd begin by asking them their names, likes, dislikes, and aspirations. Sakura and Sasuke would remain as what you would expect. Kakashi would move on to Aang, and Aang would simply identify himself as Aang without a clan name or anything, which Kakashi thinks is suspect, but he begins to lovingly nickname him just Aang, as his student had said. Aang talks about things he likes, including his flying bison named Appa, and gliding through the air. Things he dislikes would be killing and eating anything that used to be a sentient creature. As for his goals for the future, he just wants to live freely and be happy. Sasuke would ask Aang why he would want to be a shinobi if he hated killing, and Aang would say that he's just doing what everyone else is doing, and that he can be a ninja without killing people. Kakashi says it might be hard, but to try for it if that's his nindo. They would do the bell test like normal, and ironically, Aang would get the bells as soon as everything starts, since his usage of the element of air is unconventional enough for Kakashi not to expect. Kakashi would sigh as his plan backfires, but he knows he can salvage this. He tells Aang that it remains true that only 2 of them can pass. There are 2 bells, but 3 students. Who does he choose? Aang realizes that both Sasuke and Sakura want to be shinobi far more than Aang himself, and would choose them both and offer to go back to the academy. Kakashi is pleased with his answer and makes all 3 of them his genin. They would do some odd jobs as usual, and then they would get the mission to the Land of Waves. Much like Naruto, Aang would freak out when he's attacked by the Demon Brothers, but unlike Naruto, he still possesses the capability to move and gets out of the way. Pushing his fists forward, he would knock them back with a blast of air, knocking them out against the trees. He would tie them to the trees with their own chained claws and dust off his hands. He would look at the others who were rather surprised that Aang could deal with these guys himself. Aang looks back. What? They would move on and encounter Zabuza. Most of this happens the same, however Aang is incapable of transforming into the Demon Wind Shuriken, so Sasuke would need to. He asks Aang if he can throw it correctly, and Aang says he'll just use his airbending to do so. Aang would spin the massive shuriken with his air in a similar way that he would the marbles from earlier, but on a larger scale. He would toss them at Zabuza, who would dodge both, thinking that this was the ploy, not yet realizing that Sasuke had transformed. By the time he recognizes it, he's too late and needs to defend himself, which allows Kakashi to escape the water prison. With Kakashi's help, they push Zabuza back, only for him to be knocked out by Haku, who strikes him in a way that simulates death. Kakashi, however, is drained. He tells the others to attempt to run up the tree and learn to hang there. Doing so would give them better chakra control. Sakura gets it almost immediately, but Sasuke has a harder time adding too much chakra. Aang has zero luck, as he has never used his bending like this. He has great control of his energies, but he isn't sure how to do what Kakashi is telling him to do. It's not like he has a hard time running up a tree. He could use the air scooter if he wanted and end up at the top faster than you can say Flameo Hot Man. But the issue is just standing there like Kakashi was doing. Aang can fly, he can run up the side of things, but he can't just stand upside down or on water like Kakashi can. Aang assumes that if he manages to study it out, he might be able to learn water bending, which would allow him to simulate the water thing, even if he is using ice, but as it stands, he just can't do what Kakashi's asking him. Despite this, Aang would not quit training. He might begin to focus on other things. Try his hand at learning water bending. I doubt he'd be able to get all too far without a true teacher, but he might get the basics down. At least enough to push and pull, but that's about it. They would continue with the mission once Kakashi had recovered enough to move. Inari and his mother would likely be kidnapped since Aang is not too tired from training like Naruto would be. They would all be watching the building of the bridge happen when Haku and Zabuza would show up. Like the original, Zabuza would target Kakashi, and Sasuke would be targeted by Haku. But the difference is that Aang is here as well. They would be surrounded by Haku's mirrors. Aang would be utterly confused, and Sasuke would tell Aang to keep his eyes open. Aang is looking around for Haku, whose image appears in the mirrors. He's trying to figure out how this odd magic is working. That's when these senbons start coming. Aang is struck with this and is surprised with how much it hurts. He's told by Sasuke that Haku is inside the mirrors. Sasuke would try to melt them with his fireball technique, and Aang would try to with his airbending, but there was no getting through them. They just kept coming and in greater volumes as well. Aang is about to be struck when Sasuke would jump in the way of it. Sasuke would take the senbon and fall over, seemingly dead. Aang would come to his side. Sasuke, Sasuke, please don't be dead. He would not be able to tell if he was alive or not and fears for the worst. In a moment of pure rage, Aang would tap into the true power inside of him. His eyes would glow, as would his arrow. His voice becomes many talking. You will pay for that. The stone bridge around him begins to break up, and the water from nearby would pull itself upward to surround him as a ring of fire would encircle his orb of air that encapsulates him. Sakura would be awestruck, and Kakashi and even Zabuza's fight would stop for a moment as they look back. He's using 4 of the 5 nature releases at the same time? In that great of a volume? Kakashi was amazed, but went back to fighting Zabuza. Aang, in the middle of his avatar state, would rush forward, smashing the mirrors and knocking Haku out of them. Haku was overwhelmed, his mask shattering, and the sight of a kid about his age, especially one with such a kind face, causes Aang to calm, especially when he hears Sakura call out to him. Aang would fall out of the avatar state and pass out, leaving him open to Haku, but Haku doesn't attack him. Instead, he rushes over to protect Zabuza from a fatal Chidori that Kakashi was thrusting forward. Most of this basically goes the same, with the exception of Inari and his mother being hostages, but given that Zabuza has no connection to them, it wouldn't stop him. He's one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, meaning he is well within his power to free Inari and his mother from Gato's grasp. Before killing Gato, everything basically ends the same. The bridge is built, and they name it the Great Aang Bridge. They would return to the Hidden Leaf, where they would do a few more odd jobs. Kakashi's trying to figure out more of what Aang really is. You see, he wouldn't have been surprised by Naruto, given that Naruto is a known Jinchuriki, which means that he has all the power of a tailed beast inside of him. But how would he consider Aang's power? Is Aang a Jinchuriki? In control of some strange Kekkei Genkai? What's his secret? Where did that power really come from? Having no leads to go on, and Aang not being completely sure of what this is himself, Aang would merely say it's because he is the Avatar. Kakashi would ask what he meant by that. What is he the avatar of? Aang says that even he is not sure, but apparently he's the reincarnation of some legendary bender who could master all 4 elements, had a connection to the spirits, and was meant to bring balance to the world. Kakashi would internally hypothesize that this boy in his charge may somehow be the reincarnation of the Sage of Six Paths. He would be totally off the mark with that though, since Aang is really the reincarnation of ancient Ultra Instinct Shaggy. Also, it's hilarious to think that Wan's greatest feat as the first Avatar was getting a kite stuck in a tree. Kakashi would then think that it's best to offer up his team to the Chunin exams. Maybe Aang can't use conventional jutsu, but his potential made him a force to be reckoned with. Also, along with the concept that he might just be the Sage of Six Paths reincarnation. Not. Aang and the rest of Team 7 would go to sign up for the Chunin exams, but would be stopped by Rock Lee, who wishes for a match against Aang. This is because he's another student who does not possess the ability to use common jutsu. Rock Lee would see a lot in common between him and Aang. Aang would accept and the two would begin to spar. Rock Lee would come at him like a freight train, and Aang would use his own like-the-wind fighting style to just start dodging his attacks and work his way into blind spots and the like, eventually ending up behind Lee and remaining there, no matter which way Lee turned. Eventually, Lee would get around and manage to strike him. He would attempt to use the front lotus on him, but would be caught by Might Guy, who would scold and strike Lee for this. They would then hug and cry and happily run the track, all while Sakura and Sasuke consider Lee and Guy weird. Aang, on the other hand, actually finds it endearing, as it somehow reminds him of the type of relationship he had with Gyatso. They would sign up for the Chunin exams and wait for them to start. The first part of the exam is a written test. Aang really isn't the smartest, and so he's doing everything in his power to cheat. He gets a sneaky idea. He rears his head back and taking a deep and dramatic breath like there was a tickle in his nose. He would then feign a sneeze so powerful that it knocks everyone's papers off the table. He would then grab the one that had the most answered questions and pretend that it was his. He could erase the name Sakura Haruno and replace it with Aang. However, he is rather screwed when the final question that could leave him a Genin forever comes up. He's frightened by the concept and does want to leave. However, he sees the look in Sakura and Sasuke's eyes and decides he can't let his team down. He takes the question, and being that he actually decided to take it, passes. Sakura would then scold him for stealing her paper and likely bonk him on the head. Then comes the Forest of Death. Most of this actually transpires the same way except for one thing. Instead of using the 5-element sealing jutsu like Orochimaru would have on Naruto, he merely uses a chi blocking technique, which leaves Aang awake but unable to move. Orochimaru would still bite Sasuke, leaving him unconscious. Eventually, Aang's movement and bending would come back, but by this time Orochimaru is long gone, and Sasuke is in such bad shape that he can't move or even open his eyes. Aang considers having them drop out of the test, but Sakura says Sasuke wouldn't want that and that they'll just let him rest. From this point on, everything remains the same except for when the hidden sound shinobi show up. Instead of Rock Lee protecting them, Aang can do it, and he actually does about as well as Lee would have. Eventually, Sasuke would wake up, and most everything from this point remains the same. They get the second scroll due to Sasuke's cursed mark, as well as his brutal tactics, which leave Aang a bit terrified. For real, he watches him rip a kid's shoulder out of socket. Aang is starting to believe that it wasn't such a good idea to become a ninja. Then comes the exhibition matches. These go mostly the same way except for Aang's matches. Aang would go up against Kiba and Akamaru. They would use their fang over fang technique on him, but they would have a bit of a harder time going up against Aang, who can use large-scale techniques on par with Neji's 8 trigrams palm rotation, but with very little drain. Aang is also a bit faster with his air scooter, and his taijutsu skills are almost on par with Rock Lee. He wouldn't be as strong and not necessarily quite as fast as Lee, but he would be close enough and agile enough that he's capable of getting past most attacks. Aang isn't really one to hurt or fight anyone for pure sport and would want to do things calmly. He would knock Kiba down and tell him that he's beaten and offer to help him up only to have his legs swept out from under him. Kiba would call that an insult to his pride and would attempt to capitalize on Aang's precarious position, but Aang would be ready and would shoot a massive jet of air from his feet, knocking both Kiba and Akamaru into the wall, knocking them out. After these matches, the Genin would go off for a month to train. Aang would be unsure of what to do, and so he would meditate to find the answer. However, he's approached by the spirit of Kuruk, who would take him under his wing and teach him the basics of water bending for the entirety of that month. Aang would actually start to pick it up quickly. Given that it's warm and the humidity is rather high, and especially since the next matches will be held outside, this is the perfect time to try waterbending. He's taught how to take the humidity out of the air as well as his own sweat and the sweat of others. When the next match comes up against Neji, Aang is ready. He would strike out at Neji with his airbending, but Neji would defend himself. Neji knows that if he can just get close enough to strike Aang's Tenketsu, he can pacify that troublesome bending technique. However, getting close enough will be an issue as Aang can strike from afar and Neji needs to get close. Neji believes the best thing he can do is rush Aang and use the palm rotation to defend himself from attacks that he can't avoid, so he proceeds with this plan. Aang would attempt to blow him back with his wind using his glider to make each blast larger, but Neji's ready. He jumps over the horizontal blasts and sidesteps the vertical ones. Aang is having a hard time pinning him down, but the closer Neji gets, the easier it becomes to strike him, the less time that Neji has to dodge. Aang steps up his attacks, but Neji uses 8 trigrams palm rotation to block them. Neji would then strike out at Aang's tenketsu, but find that he can't move. The plants below his feet have grabbed onto his feet. Aang explains that he managed to get a very good grasp on water bending and that plants are made up of water. Neji tells him that humans are as well. Aang thinks about this, but he knows he's nowhere near the level required to do that. Neji manages to break free by ditching his shoes. He keeps to the pavement where there is no grass. This is taxing though, because the sun has baked the pavement, which is slowly burning his feet. But Neji takes this as a reason to finish it quickly and keeps moving along even faster than before. He would strike out at Aang and incapacitate his arms, but he would also be careful and incapacitate his feet, so he couldn't be done the same way as Kiba had been. With Aang's limbs completely paralyzed, he thinks this is in the bag. However, he didn't take into account how Aang can utilize airbending and would be subject to a sneak attack. Aang would take in a deep breath and expel air from his lungs with such force that both he and Neji are pushed away. Aang hits the wall and Neji does as well. This ends up in a double knockout. Despite everything, Aang is congratulated for having at least forced a draw on the prodigy Neji. Aang's limbs would eventually loosen up again, and he would watch Sasuke's battle alongside Sakura. However, halfway through this, the Konoha crush begins. Everything goes about the same from here on, except instead of using Gamabunta, Aang would use Avatar State to beat Shukaku and Gaara. He would still spare him though, and Aang would offer a hand to Gaara, telling him that he could do such good if he would just let love into his heart. He would offer a soft smile and help Gaara up. Gaara would flee with his brethren, and Aang would travel back to Konoha with the rest. Then comes the search for Tsunade. However, Aang isn't Naruto and thus doesn't have the Nine Tails, meaning Itachi doesn't have a reason to come back. But this also means that Naruto isn't there to save Tsunade, meaning she would die, and Danzo would replace her, being the only one worthy of the position with Hiruzen dead. This would not change Sasuke's desire to grow stronger, and he would challenge Aang to a fight. However, it goes differently than it would with Naruto. Aang maintains a kind outlook and remains calm the entire time, letting his movements protect him without harming Sasuke. However, this isn't as easy as it was with Rock Lee, as Sasuke has a Sharingan which increases his reaction time, meaning Aang has a harder time dodging. However, when Sasuke attempts to use Chidori, Aang senses the killing intent behind it and knows he needs to end the battle now before someone gets hurt. He uses his waterbending to pull the water out of the towers atop the hospital and wash it all over Sasuke and then freeze it, leaving only his head exposed. Sasuke screams and curses Aang for his strength. This is when Kakashi shows up and scolds them for fighting like this, especially Sasuke for using a killing technique against a friend. He advises Sasuke to look back over his priorities and decide what kind of man he wants to be. Well, the Sound Force show up, kick his rear, and make that decision for him. This leads to Sasuke leaving the village during the night. Thus begins the Sasuke recovery mission. Most of this stays the same until the Valley of the End, where Sasuke awakens his second stage of his cursed seal. And despite this being Aang's element, Sasuke has access to fire-style jutsu and thus can melt the ice or evaporate it with the strength he's granted. Even when Aang makes a large water octopus, Sasuke pierces through it with his Chidori and strikes Aang in the shoulder. This causes Aang to pass out as blood fills the water. Sasuke looks down at Aang, relishes his newfound strength, but can't bring himself to murder the boy, so he turns and leaves. As Aang is passed out, he hears the voices of avatars past and feels he's close to death. However, his time has not come yet, and he awakens to find the wound on his shoulder has been frozen closed by waterbending. He's then taken to the hospital for recovery. Aang promises a saddened Sakura that he will bring Sasuke back, and as such goes off on a journey to help himself grow stronger. At some point he would have a run-in with Jiraiya. Jiraiya helps him better his martial arts movements and further explains that Aang seems to be using an almost sage-like ability, in that he uses natural energies alongside his own when he uses this bending thing. He tells Aang that he should focus on that, and from that point on, Aang trains for the next 2 years. Well, I think that's long enough for a video. I don't want to keep you here all day, and so I think right here is a good place to end the story for now. But don't worry, a second part is coming your way very soon, but you will need to wait just a little bit longer. Let us know if you enjoyed this little experiment, and if you would like to see more like it in the future. We could always follow Naruto in the Avatar world, and we could branch out even further. Maybe drop baby Goku into the Attack on Titan world. Would you like to see that? Be sure to drop your own ideas of things you'd like to see in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing for more content like this. Flameo hot man, and peace.